Alright, so let's talk about choosing a sewing machine. Choosing a sewing machine is a personal thing, and it's kind of based on your plans and your needs, and everyone's skills and needs are different. And so while I can give you my advice and the advice I've learned from others, you'll still have to decide what you think will be best for your specific situation. Now there's two main kinds of sewing machines. There's the mechanical sewing machine, and there's a computerized or electronic sewing machine. And they have some differences and they have some pros and cons, so let's break those down a little bit more. A manual sewing machine is good if you're an occasional sewer or you're on a tight budget. This machine should work fine. They require you to manipulate these controls by hand, so often like dials or knobs, and you will do things like adjust tension and choose your stitch length manually. So that's kind of how mechanical or manual sewing machines work. Now the pro is that they often are cheaper. There's less features, and so they just don't cost as much. But a con is that you have to do things manually, like adjust the tension and things like that. These machines can handle basic repairs. They can do hems and simple clothing and craft projects. And they tend to be simpler to operate, and they usually aren't quite as heavy because they don't have the computer inside, and they require less maintenance because there's no computer to keep up with. If you keep them clean and some machines oiled, then they will serve you for a long time. So manual sewing machines, dials, knobs, things you have to do manually. Those would be manual or mechanical sewing machines. The other type of sewing machine would be a computerized or electronic sewing machine. Now, these machines shift a lot of the frustrating jobs, especially as a beginner, like adjusting your tension to the machine. So you generally don't have to adjust the tension as much. Now, some of them you still do, but a lot of the newer computerized machines will adjust the tension for you. And these typically have some kind of touchpad or LED screen or like just a few buttons, as you can see on this one. So if you sew frequently or you can spend more, an electronic model can be a worthwhile investment. Like I said, they shift the frustrating jobs from you onto the machine. And they can often have a lot of different presser feet, things for piping and zipper and button installation, and they often have a lot of stitches, as you can see here. So definitely more stitches generally come with computerized sewing machines. And a well-maintained computerized machine will sew a really great straight stitch every time. High-end machines generally are computerized in one way or another unless you're looking at things like an industrial machine. But a lot of the higher-end machines now will be computerized. And again, it just simplifies the stitch selection, making buttonholes, and all the different programmable stitch sequences. And one of the greatest benefits is the motor. Because most computerized machines are usually higher priced, they tend to have a higher powered motor. They make a better motor because it's a higher priced, better quality machine. And so those are better for heavy duty projects in general. Now that's not to say that manual or mechanical machines can't do heavy duty projects. They definitely can, especially some of those really old Singer machines, or there's some very old machines that are very strong and heavy duty. Nowadays a lot of machines are made with plastic. So again, it's kind of up to you what you're planning on sewing, what you want to be working with. If you think you're going to be using a bunch of fancy stitches, you might want to do a computerized machine. If you think you're just going to be doing some basic repairs, a manual machine might be fine. And if you already have a machine, that's great. You don't even need to worry about this. You can move on to the next lessons, because if you already have a machine, just go with what you've got. You can definitely be a beginner and use the machine that you have. So now let's talk a little bit about different sewing machine brands. You've probably heard of Singer, or Brother, or Kenmore. Those are some well-known brands, but they're generally known as lower quality brands. Brands like Bernina or Husqvarna Viking, Janome, Juki, Babylock, those are typically more known as higher end brands. Now, is there a best brand? No, there's not. It just depends on what's right for you. There's plenty of people who love their Singer or Brother sewing machines. And in fact, I have a Singer sewing machine that I've had for about 6 or 7 years now, and it works fantastic. I also have just a basic Singer Serger. I didn't want to spend money on a higher end one. So it all depends on what you're looking for. There really is no best brand. But there are some tips I want to give you for choosing a machine. Now, the number one tip, no matter what your brand, is to avoid plastic parts. This will cause you more problems than it's worth. Plastic parts are going to break on you, they're going to be used in the cheaper sewing machines, and they're just going to cause more problems. The reason that my Singer machine works so well, even though it's a Singer and a lot of Singers have plastic parts, is that my particular Singer, the Quantum Stylist 9960, has metal parts inside. And so I'm able to sew through thick layers and work on heavy duty fabric, and I haven't had any major issues. So typically, the cheaper the machine, the more plastic parts there will be. Now, again, go with what your budget allows, and if it's cheaper, that's okay. You can still sew with one. Just know it might not last you as long because the quality probably won't be quite as good. And you want to get the best machine within your budget. So that doesn't mean get like the most fun features and all these things. It kind of means avoid as much plastic as you can and go with more metal. So always, if given the choice, choose a machine with metal parts. It's an investment and you want to make sure you're spending your money on something that will last. And then, more often than not, new sewists will choose an inexpensive machine to get started because they don't know if they'll actually sew or if they'll really use the machine. And then that machine can have so many problems that whenever they sit down to sew, it's more hassle than it's worth. And then they're spending more time trying to fix the problems than actually sewing. And so that quote-unquote cheap machine gets shoved to the back of the closet and then they don't even sew just because it was so frustrating. So if you have the means to get a little bit of a nicer machine, definitely do it. If not, it's alright. Just know you might have some problems with your machine down the road. Tip number 3 is check out a dealership. So if you can buy from a dealership versus a chain store, you're going to get some extra benefits. So, all machines have slight variations to their setups and features, and if you buy from a dealer, you'll get expertise in choosing the right machine for you specifically, and they can often show you how to use the features specific to that particular machine and answer questions specific to it. So, they'll likely be able to help you learn to thread your machine and how to wind the bobbin. They'll be able to show you those things specific to your machine. And also, it's probably a place that you're going to be able to take your machine back to for maintenance and service and things along the way in your sewing journey because, yes, you will have to take your machine in to get repaired or to just be kept up with every couple years or so. Now, a nice thing with dealers is sometimes they offer trade-ins or trade-ups. So, dealers will often have used machines for sale that are a lot cheaper than buying new. And they'll already have inspected those machines, and so some might even have a warranty on them. So that would be a good place to start as a beginner. If you don't have as much money but you want to get a nicer machine and you want to go to a dealer and try them out, you might be able to get a used machine. And then if you get a used one and you're like, I actually want something a little bit nicer, you could always trade up into a more advanced machine at a dealership later. But on the other hand, buying from an online store, like Amazon or an online sewing shop, you probably will find lower prices. Dealers are going to be more expensive, so getting something online, you'll probably find a lower price, but you'll also probably be able to read reviews, which is good, but you won't have someone to talk to and you won't be able to get your hands on the machine and like see how it feels, see if you like the features, and you won't have someone to kind of guide you along. So I always suggest, even if you're going to buy online, it's a good idea if you're able to even just go check out a sewing machine dealer, and just see if you can try using a machine. See if they can show you just how a machine works and the different parts. That way, even if you buy online, you've kind of got a step up, and you can kind of see some of the features that you might like already when you go to search online. Alright? And the very last tip I have for choosing a machine is get a machine you can grow into. So it's helpful to get a machine as a beginner that won't be too complicated or complex. You don't want so many features that you're just overwhelmed, but you also want one that you can grow into. So think about what you have an interest of sewing in, and what are you going to use a machine for. So, for example, do you hope to sew pouches and bags and wallets someday that have zippers? If so, you might want to have a machine that can do zippers, that would have a zipper foot. Or do you plan on sewing clothing? Because you probably want one that maybe has an automatic buttonhole or a free arm. Those things can make sewing clothing a lot easier. If you're into quilting, you might want a machine with a longer throat that allows more fabric to get in. And so it kind of depends on what your goals are. And I know those can change as you get into sewing and figure out what you like. But they're just some things to think about of what do you kind of envision for your future in sewing, of things that you're wanting to do, because that can lead you in a certain direction with the machine that you want. And a final quick tip is don't get seduced by the number of stitches. So instead of finding a machine that has like 600 stitches, which you probably will never use, get one with stitches that you will actually use, that has features that are just basic features that you know you will use. At the core of sewing, you really only need 2 stitches, a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch. And almost all sewing can be accomplished with those 2 stitches. That's almost basically all I use. So it's nice to have some other features, like some machines have an automatic thread cutter, or like I said, the electronic machines might have tension that's automatic for you. Those things would be more valuable than 1,000 different stitches. So keep that in mind when you're looking for a sewing machine. And we're going to go over in this next lesson different parts of a sewing machine. And we'll talk about some of the features that are more desirable. You don't have to have them, but they might be desirable to have, and the different parts of the sewing machine that you need to know about. So let's move on to the next lesson.